A scattered to widespread severe weather outbreak appears probable to our west. We're going to talk about how that's going to influence our area Friday night. Hello everybody, the time is 10:13 p.m. It's a late one, but it is March 29th. Welcome to another update from Great Lakes Weather. Hopefully everybody is doing well today. Friday is definitely going to be an interesting day across much of the continental United States, and as we get into Friday night, I think the Great Lakes region is also going to get in on some of the severe weather action that is currently being projected by the SPC and current weather models. Latest HRRR just came in that's going to give us some information about how this is going to unfold across the Great Lakes region. So we're going to look at that. We're going to examine 3 other models that could help give us some info and insight into how this works. Make sure to subscribe and stay updated. There are multiple severe weather events expected over the next several days. So, and the question is, how much will it impact the Great Lakes region? Not sure, but it is important to stay updated, and I'm just here to give you the raw weather model information and kind of do a little bit of interpreting for it as well. So let's get right to it with what is currently being shown by the SPC. So here's the SPC's current model run. So you notice that there's an enhanced risk of severe weather, the largest enhanced risk that has been put in place in a very long time. I think it's been 5 years since we've had one this big across much of the Great Lakes region, almost the size of mainland France from what I saw on a recent post from someone. But it's pretty funny when you think about it. But it's also a dangerous day. Definitely want to be careful if you are in the enhanced risk area. This includes anywhere from southwestern Indiana for the Great Lakes region and spanning much across areas to the west of our region. And then you can see that slight risk area also starting to hover into parts of southwest Michigan and eastern Ohio. Models do seem to be consistent with that assessment that the SPC gave previously. I do think that the risk area will extend somewhere into parts of Ohio. It will not extend very far into Michigan, given that I think the cold lake, will kind of reduce the strength of the storms as they come over the lake. So I think Michigan's going to kind of miss out on this event. I really think the focus of the event for the Great Lakes region is going to be Indiana, right here, especially anywhere shaded in orange. Could see severe weather. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a moderate risk come from this somewhere out in this orange enhanced risk area. It does look like a very viable severe weather event across that region. And then Friday night after dark, unfortunately for a lot of us, that's when we like to see the storms, but after dark it's going to be coming in, which is an especially dangerous time. So you're going to want to be aware and be able to keep up to date with the current weather information that we have across this region. So that's what the SPC is showing. A possible severe weather outbreak across the enhanced risk area with lingering severe storms across this region possible as well. So let's get to the raw weather models to get an idea of what is taking place. Let's first look at the GFS model, which this is the most up-to-date run as of now, but everyone pretty much across Michigan did see that snow squall move through earlier today, with temperatures now dropping to 25. It's crazy to think that we'll be dealing with severe weather in 2 days, but that snow squall has moved off to the east. That's the snow squall right there. By the time we get to Thursday morning, it'll be out of the United States. We move into Thursday. You do notice this low pressure system deepening across parts of the plains. You do have rain showers developing in front of it. Those rain showers and the cloud cover associated will have a big determining factor in the strength of severe weather across the Great Lakes region, as the less amount of moisture content that falls over that time period Friday morning will influence the level of instability we have in the afternoon. More instability if there's less rainfall and more sunshine. So that's going to have a big key role. And as you notice, Michigan's going to get in on a huge brunt of the rain. I think Michigan's really going to miss out on some of the severe weather activity, which is good news. I think Indiana's going to be more of a concern. But you notice that moves through by Friday at 7 a.m. The rain's still falling in some spots, even Indiana as well. Progressing it forward, you do start to see initial thunderstorm development Friday at about 1 p.m. across portions of Missouri. So that's going to continue to develop by about 1 p.m. You do see the sounding does not look very good for severe weather per the GFS, but you do see that directional and speed shear across that region, and the very low cloud bases, storm relative velocity values in the 200 values. I think you'll see more of a viable severe weather event as we get to later in the time frame. GFS again, get a sounding in Indiana. Still not showing a very good setup for severe weather, but again, GFS is one model. I'm going to show you the other models, and it'll show you why it could be a very viable severe weather event across the region. There's your first marginal severe hazard type. You have storm relative velocity values close to 300. You have that very strong speed and directional shear in the atmosphere. Temperatures are only in the 60s according to the GFS, but again, with these wind fields that we have across this area, it's going to have a pretty decent influence on what takes place. Continuing it forward, you notice that you see a lot of clusters of thunderstorms, perhaps maybe a QLCS forming, quasi-linear convective system, beginning to move through parts of Indiana by about 10 p.m. after dark. So, and then it continues to move through Ohio with some thunderstorm activity, a little less in severity potentially, but it could linger into the morning hours. There's still a lot of unpredictable factors we've got to consider with this, but still most models do show consistency with stronger thunderstorms and maybe even, yes, some snow on the backside Saturday morning, April 1st, the first day of April, April Fool's Day. You start with tornadoes and then you go back to winter. It's quite an April Fool that God's playing on us. So that is currently what is being shown by the GFS. I'm going to look at the severe weather dynamics for that in a little bit, but first let's look at some of the other models. So here you have the ECMWF model, which is very similar. I'm going to go closer to our region. So what you see here is you have your warm air mass, your cool air mass kind of competing. Once again, associated with that snow squall, that's where we're at right now. And then you see that warm air mass begin to surge into our area rather quickly. By the time we get to Friday morning, temperatures will be warming up. And you do notice that there's a bit more scattered thunderstorm activity developing Friday morning across the region. It's likely going to be mainly rain, just regular rainfall across the Great Lakes region during the morning. Doesn't really look viable for any thunderstorm or stronger thunderstorm. You might hear a rumble of thunder here and there, but it really doesn't look like that's the likely scenario. By the time we get to the afternoon, you do see some thunderstorms beginning to develop. Get a sounding across southwest Michigan. You don't really have that hazard type shown. Storm relative velocity is there, but Cape instability is not really present in any situation. Cloud bases are high. You have directional shear, but still not very much of a viable setup as of that time period. The real concern is going to be out west, where you have that cold front begin to move in. There's your tornado sounding, your directional shear. Really, this photograph does not favor a tornado setup. Looks to favor more of a damaging wind setup here, but with this damaging wind setup, you do have Cape values of 1600 out here. SRH is not as high as what is shown farther off, but still enough to foster maybe a weak tornado with that. But look at these wind profiles at all different levels of the atmosphere. You have southerlies at the surface, changing to westerlies in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Definitely able to foster that directional shear and speed shear needed to cause spin, and given a lifting mechanism such as the cold front that will be extending here, you can have a very decent setup for storms like this. Continue to intensify by about 7 p.m. You still have these storms moving through parts of Illinois. Tornado sounding continues, consistent hazard type tornado there. You do have, again, your storm relative velocity values really increase as you get farther into this region, and you start to see that arc on that photograph that can be a further indicator of that potential. And it's not very capped in the atmosphere at all, so definitely going to help with storm development. And then we get to 10 p.m. The quasi-linear convective system, or QLCS, begins to move into Indiana. You have that marginal tornado potential continuing. Still a little bit of instability out there. SRH values still relatively high. Could foster some weak tornadoes within that, and then you can see it continues into Ohio by about 1 a.m. before it begins to die out and move off to the east, and then you have that snow that you're dealing with on the backside. Euro is very consistent here we're somewhat consistent here with GFS in regards to this setup. Let's back it up. We're going to freeze frame it because we're going to compare models soon regarding the potential setup. So Now let's look at two of the more high definition models. We have the NAM3K and the HRRR. We're going to look at both of those real quick. NAM again likes to really hype up these events in past what I've seen, really hyped up events. So you can see more of a worst case scenario type of event with the NAM3K. Still valuable information to have when you look at this model. But let's progress it forward to when we actually start to see the weather begin to fire up. This is by about 2 a.m. Friday morning. You see showers, isolated thunderstorms beginning to develop. Interesting thing here is the NAM really kind of goes a little bit wacky with how things are set up. You do notice there's a little bit of capping in the atmosphere. Convective inhibition, though, is not really being represented there. SRH is at 700 again. I do think the NAM does go a little bit crazy with some of its projections, but still, it's valuable when you want to look at that best case or worst case scenario event. That rainfall is going to move throughout the morning, and again, the amount of rainfall and cloud cover is going to heavily determine this setup across the Great Lakes region, progressing it farther to the east. Or by the time we get to Friday afternoon, you see you have a line of thunderstorms beginning to develop. Interesting thing put out by the NAM is that these cells could have some marginal severe potential based on the soundings. The environment does show you still have directional and speed shear in the atmosphere. A little bit of instability. Your SRH values are at 300 to 400, and really this photograph is a little bit sick and twisted for severe weather, but still that is currently what is being shown on the NAM3K. So you have this line of storms. You get a sounding around Missouri, showing that tornado sounding, and then by the time we get to when that line really starts to take off and increase in intensity, you can go and look around. You still see that tornado sounding, a very primed tornado sounding. You have that arc, that photograph. Usually the ideal, you'd have a curve that looks more like this, which we don't have, but still you have that very strong shear in the atmosphere. You have that Cape values of 1,000, SRH values about 400 to 500 in some spots. So definitely fostering severe weather development. And what you'll see as we progress forward by about 7 p.m., it really does form a quasi-linear convective line, is what the NAM projects. And notice here, why I think Michigan's going to really miss out on this event is, again, that lake is still quite cold from the winter, and I do think these storms will not be able to draw on the energy that it can draw over land, and the sun is beginning to go down at this point, so you can start to see the storms begin to weaken as a result. But very strong storms likely through Indiana as we get into the overnight hours, and then also even possibly lingering as we get into Ohio at about 1 a.m. So definitely going to be a possibly strong to even dangerous event, especially in western Indiana, and then stronger storms in Ohio as that moves through. You get a sounding as that approaches Ohio down in Cedarville. That's where I'll be during this time. It really shows that your base of your clouds is starting to become more elevated, and you're starting to get that cooling from the nighttime that's really going to inhibit these storms to continue to draw in strength, but they will still linger as they get there. This is as far as this model goes, so we're not going to go any further than that. I want to see how far the latest model has updated, if we can get a better idea. Not really too good yet, so we can't really look at that in this video, but maybe we'll look at it a little bit later. Stay tuned for that possibly. But HRRR model, let's take a look at that now with the storm development that we could see. You have that rainfall begin to move through. And then as we get into about 7 p.m. again, now the NAM is the HRRR is actually putting out something a little bit interesting in that the storms are actually going to develop a little bit earlier, 7 p.m. across the western border of Indiana. Now if you get a sounding from those storms, let's back it up first of all and look at what it looks like in Missouri first of all. There's your tornado sounding, still looking like more of a damaging wind photograph as being shown there. Still your directional speed shear is present. You have low cloud bases, broad level of free convection, and then Cape values relatively elevated, supercell composite of 9.2, still fostering all severe hazards type event, but still primarily a damaging wind threat looking prevalent with the storms as they develop. As we get to 7 p.m., you see the storms begin to move into Indiana according to the HRRR model, and that's where you see your more prime tornado sounding. You get a more intense jet actually as you get into Indiana, which will prime these storms for a bit more tornado potential possibly. So I think Indiana may actually see a bit more of a chance for tornadoes than even possibly some places farther out to the west. But again, we'll have to see how things play out. Again, you'll have probably more along the lines of lone supercells developing across Missouri. There's still a lot of variables to play with this event, and you see this rainfall that could possibly develop ahead of this could further cause inhibition with storm development. But interesting thing to point out is that these storms that are being carried over across the lake, I don't know how long those storms will survive. It really seems like those will not make it over the lake, but again, only time will tell. You do have strong shear profiles that could keep those intact, but a few different models here that are still inconsistent with each other, so there's going to be a lot that we're going to have to consider up to this point. All right, let's freeze frame it on when these storms begin to come into Indiana. Let's look at the compare models loop for this setup, and I want to look at some of the severe weather dynamics. First of all, let's look at the upper air winds, 500 millibar height. Here is your upper levels. Again, you have a strong jet stream favoring this event, southwesterlies that are coming in as a result of a trough ejection and a deepening low off to the west, going to be moving into the region. Mid-layer, you have your strong mid-layer winds that will also contribute to that speed shear in the atmosphere, and it's following along the lines with, it's actually a little bit more to the south than the 500 millibar height, which is higher up in the atmosphere, which could cause a bit of directional shear. Surface winds, again, still out of the southwest as well, very strong as you get into Indiana. So this is actually just below the mid layer, so kind of also still having an influence on storms there. Wind gusts associated with this, you have strong winds embedded around these storms and within these storms, which will contribute to the strength of them. Dew points, again, very interesting setup here. You have your dew points in the 60s across Illinois. Where you see more moisture is where you could more likely see more instability and more severe weather. So the higher the moisture, the more energy those storms can draw off of. NAM also following similar to this setup, and GFS does downplay a bit of the moisture a little bit, but you can see there's quite a bit of model consistency with where the dew points will be maintained. And then the other thing I want to look at real quick is the positioning of these storms at 7 p.m. So GFS and HRRR are relatively similar, so is the Euro plays it a little bit back. NAM also plays it a little bit back. NAM 3K also plays it backwards. So you have the NAM versus HRRR, GFS, ECMWF high res, some differences there. Alright, so let's look at the severe weather dynamics now real quick. Surface-based CAPE at about 7 p.m. Definitely see that it's more focused with the storms. You have that potential of 200 joules, and you have pretty much a setup for instability to be positioned right around Illinois. Interesting thing is that the instability for the HRRR is positioned at Illinois despite the storms being out ahead of the main line of instability. So that's a comparison to the NAM. The NAM follows a little bit more consistent with the HRRR in that case, so that's an interesting thing to point out. But the storm relative velocity is going to be very high with this. You're definitely going to notice there's going to be a lot of spin in the atmosphere for this event, so that spin is going to really contribute to possible convective initiation, and more intense spin in the atmosphere could produce more damaging winds and maybe the possibility of more tornadoes. Significant tornado parameters, again, you see they are pretty elevated in some spots, but again, this is not a very large number until you get into the purple. The purple is where you have a cause to be a bit more concerned with this setup. So Illinois looks like you could see some of that in your particular region at 7 p.m. One thing I'm noticing is that the HRRR, GFS, ECMWF is playing it farther east and the NAM is playing it farther back, but the instability for the HRRR and the NAM is positioned in central Illinois. It's very interesting how the models are depicting that. But you also have updraft velocity showing the probable tornado paths. HRRR, we can't really show it super well. It does show some interesting updraft velocity with the storms that fire in parts of Wisconsin. I don't think that's going to be something to pay attention to. Look at the updraft velocity here all across Illinois. That's pretty impressive, but we don't really have all the models ready for this to show this just yet. You only have 3 models showing it at the current moment. But as you can see, there's still a lot of things to be finalized with this setup. I would refer to the SBC, National Weather Service, for the latest updates. But again, the focus of severe weather is expected to be out in this region here, with the chance of severe weather farther out in this area here. So keep that in mind. And hopefully this video, although being fast-paced, was very helpful, informational to you, getting just an overview of the models, getting a little bit of a look at what the questions still need to be answered. Make sure to subscribe and stay updated. We'll continue to provide updates as we go. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay safe and stay aware on Friday.